Yeah.
Hey
Glenn.
Pepe, how you doing?
Hi again, Glenn. So this recording is for and this interview for my radio show in KXSF Radio in San Francisco. My radio show is called Drums in Front, and this is going to be aired next Monday, just a couple of days before your concert, your third concert of this upcoming tour of yours,
Yeah,
right?
no, it'll be the fifth one actually. So we should know what we're doing by then. We're doing San Diego, Long Beach, Los Angeles,
Uh-huh.
Las Vegas, and
Mhm.
then coming to San Francisco to play at the Great American Music Hall, which I love. I played there a few years back before lockdown with a thing called LAMF with
Mhm.
Clam and Walter from the Heartbreakers and Mike Ness from Social Distortion. We did like a Heartbreakers tribute thing, and it was a great place. Really liked it.
You're talking about the 2012 show in San Francisco? Are you talking about that one?
Yeah, I think so. I can't remember when it was. No, it was after that. What is it now? It's
I
24.
think it was in 2012 that you played with Hugh Cornwell from the
No,
Stranglers.
no, no. After that,
Ah,
after
okay,
that,
there was another one.
there was another one. Yeah,
Okay.
and I know that place. I like the Great American Music Hall,
Yeah.
and there's a great plaque outside on the wall on the pavement where it says it was like a burlesque, and gentlemen would go there
Uh-huh.
and might hopefully meet ladies of um, not straightforward repute. It's kind of funny. I thought, oh, I might meet one. You never
Ah, well.
know.
So speaking of shows or your past shows, uh, I saw you in New Zealand. Uh,
in,
in New Zealand.
in New Zealand.
Yeah, I was vacationing with my family in 2017, and I was walking Wellington, and I saw suddenly a flyer. I saw a poster, uh, and it said, Glen Matlock playing. I don't remember the date. I think it was November, and so I was with my wife and daughter, and I said, "Hey, let's go. Let's see Glen Matlock." And so we went to this
Yeah, it
pub,
was close.
this venue, and you were playing an acoustic set.
Yeah, yeah. And in fact, that was just before I did the LAMF thing because I flew from Wellington
Uh-huh.
to New York to rehearse for that.
Hmm.
And it made me feel like Sir Francis Drake, right?
Why?
Because I'd been one way, I've been around the world a few times, but you always go there and come back. And I went one way via Hong Kong, and then I did a tour with a pickup band, some friends in Australia. And then I got asked to do two acoustic shows. And then I flew back the other way to New York. So I'd actually, the first time I've been all the way around the world, like in one direction. Yeah, Glen Matlock, Sir Francis Drake.
Uh, here in Northern California, there are areas called Sir Francis Drake.
Right.
And a very interesting thing about that guy is that that guy is I believe he's some kind of hero for the British, right?
Well, kind of, but uh, he was also a pirate, really. I mean, it's a long time ago, and we can talk mano a mano, but he saved the British
Uh-huh.
from the Spanish Armada.
Yeah.
So he's a hero because of that, but also he was a pirate. And what they used to do, the Spaniards and their galleons would go to the New World and bring back silver and gold.
Yeah.
And what they would do, they would rob them in the middle of the Atlantic. So, and
Mm.
that's why they sent the Spanish Armada to try and, well, it wasn't only that because it was like Catholicism against Protestantism. So it was all kind of right in that. But also, I know in San Francisco, there's a few places named after Sir Francis Drake, and
Yeah.
there's a fantastic hotel just off of Union Square that I always try and stay at. Although I think it's been renovated and changed, but it's called the Sir Francis Drake. And
Mm.
outside, they got these big black guys dressed up as kind of middle-aged yeomen of the guard in like kind of English costumes from 1450. They're the bellboys. It's
Uh-huh.
quite, it's kind of like a little bit odd. It's
Well,
kind of cool. Good for them. Yeah.
people like costumes in San Francisco, let me tell you. People would find any excuse in order to dress up. So speaking of Francis Drake, I told you that I'm from Peru, right? And
Yeah.
so I have been to places in the Peruvian coast where there are um, areas that are known because Drake used to how do you say, what's the word? Used to assault the Spanish, and sometimes he would assault the people on the coast. And so it's very interesting, because Drake, for the Spanish, according to the Spanish, he was like a terrible villain, right? But as you told me, for the British, he was a hero sometimes and sometimes not so much, right?
Yeah, exactly. And also, there's famous quote about him. He
Uh-huh.
was playing bowls. You know, bowls when you
No.
roll a ball along the grass.
Uh-huh.
It's called bowls. In France, it's called pétanque or something like that. You know, anyway, he was playing a game of bowls in Plymouth, and somebody rode up to me and said, Sir Francis, the Spanish are coming." And he said, "Let me finish my game of bowls, and then I'll deal with them."
Does bowling come from that?
Well, it was a game for many years, not
Hmm.
not 10-pin bowling indoors on grass.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. Every country's got a hero who's probably a villain for somebody else. So,
Yeah. Yeah. The
but if you're Spanish and you're anti Sir Francis Drake, he actually died in the Caribbean of dysentery.
Oh, he did.
So yeah, so he came to a sticky end. So there you go.
Well, I also read somewhere that there were some stories about him having an affair with the Virgin Queen.
Well, no, that was Sir Walter Raleigh.
Okay.
He was another one, and Sir Walter Raleigh is the man who went to the like Sir Francis Drake. He went to the New World,
Hmm.
and he came back with the potato, the tomato, and tobacco.
Well,
And there's a Beatles song where I'm so tired I haven't slept a wink. And John Lennon goes, and he's probably smoking at 4 o'clock in the morning. And he goes, and curse Sir Walter Raleigh. He was such a stupid get. He was like an idiot
hmm.
because he brought back tobacco that everybody got addicted to. So
Uh-huh.
there you go. It's just quite historical. But this isn't a very rock and roll punk rock conversation.
So far, but it's interesting, and I like those. I like those things for sure. And um, anyway, let's talk about music for a moment. Your last LP, Consequences Coming. Um, I heard it, and it's really cool.
Oh,
Uh,
thank you.
and I have also been listening to your previous LPs, and
Right.
I found that you have a consistent line of work. You have a consistent style, more or less consistent. And I wanted to ask you, um, what has changed musically in you and in your music?
What has changed?
Mhm.
Nothing. I've always done the same old thing. I like a kind of 3.5 minute pop rock song that's quite hopefully well constructed with some good playing on it. What does change is the subject matter of the songs, and I think it's the songwriter's duty to reflect their take on the world around them. Now, I kind of tend to do a similar kind of thing that I've always done. But, you can't walk down the street and go in a shoe shop or a cafe and hear music playing. And, music evolves and you hear things. And whether it's conscious or subconsciously, everything kind of seeps into your psyche. And when you write a song, there's probably a tiny little bit of that in it as well. You know, when you make a soup or a you know, a stew, there's lots of little different ingredients in, and that you might not necessarily notice them, but you'd notice them if they wasn't there. You
Mhm.
know, so that kind of feeds into my songwriting somehow. I don't know. There's lots of stuff been going on in the world, especially in England. You know, with Brexit and
Yeah.
around the world. There's a real lurch to the right wing a little bit. It's not my cup of tea. So some of the songs I've got are to do with that. You know, it's my take on that. And I think there's a lot of wrong uns about. And the lead single from the album was called Head on a Stick. And I think a few people should be made an example of. So,
Mm. I yeah, I read about your position on Brexit. That hasn't changed then, right?
no. And I think I've been coming more entranced about that. It's not only Brexit itself, it's enabled the most right wing government we've ever had. And
Yeah.
they're idiots and they're wrong uns. I think they're going to come really unstuck. And I think there's going to be an election this year sometime. And it's looking like they're going to get totally decimated. I
Hmm.
really hope so. They've steered the British nation, who are better than that, down this small dead end of narrow minded bigotry that I think is wrong.
Hopefully,
Yeah.
hopefully you're right. But what's the alternative? The Labour Party, right?
Yeah. And I think they're much better.
Hmm.
You know, I haven't got an unfailing belief in them, but I think they're more honest. They're not so corrupt, and we'll see. And you got to give somebody else a chance, really. I think
Yeah.
so. There
I
you go. I mean, they're not the most socialist party in the world that like they used to be. Um, I think I'm a socialist with a small s,
mm.
but I do believe in kind of, you know, looking after the underdog a little bit and giving people a hand up and not punching down. You know.
You know, speaking of that, in my opinion, a lot of punks throughout these decades uh, misunderstood some stuff, and they went for extreme individualism. And
Yeah.
I think that, and in this case, we're not only talking about politics. I'm also talking about your career because you started political movement, not only a band, also a political movement. You guys changed a lot of things for.
Well, it was said that I don't know that we necessarily set out to do that. I think we just set out to speak our minds and let the devil take the hindmost. And I think we was actually so apolitical that it became political. But you know, punk rock, it's almost a bit like the Bible. You know, people read into it
Yeah,
what they want to get out of it. You know,
yeah.
and it's a bit of a kind of a sword of Damocles hanging over our heads. Steve Jones said, you know, when people say this, what you've just said, he says, "Listen, mate, you know, we just went in the studio and made a rock record, you know," and then people put all these things on top of us. I mean, I don't think you ever find Steve Jones standing up in Parliament talking about, you know, the rights of man or anything. He just wanted to have a laugh and make a racket and stir things up a bit, which is what we did.
Yeah.
But it did, you know, when the whole Brexit thing was going on, there was people, you know, I was saying my piece about it. And then there'd be some old punks writing in, "Oh, Glenn, don't you realise that the right wing is the new left wing?"
Oh,
And I
that's
thought, you're an idiot, you know.
Lydon.
Yeah.
Lydon talks about that, and he says that the new um, rebels or the new counterculture is a right wing, and I don't know where he got that idea from, honestly.
I think he's pandering to his what he assumes is to be his working class roots, but You know, John hasn't been working class for a long, long time. We disagree about that. And all these people who wrote to me who said what I've just told you, you know, you kind of look them up a little bit, you know, on their timeline, and
Mm.
they were all Public Image fans. So I thought, well, there you go.
Yeah, yeah,
You
of
know,
course, of
there's
course.
not a lot of love lost there.
Yeah. Um,
But anyway, I'm not here to have a go at John.
I,
He's
mm,
a man of his own mind, and we're different people. You know, it's chalk and cheese. But, yeah, but I think he's wrong. He probably thinks I'm wrong, but I know I'm right that he's wrong, and he's
I,
wrong if he's right and I'm wrong.
I agree with you on that one. I mean, I I think that it personally, I think that it's okay to criticize the left wing, but if you're criticizing the left wing, and on the other hand, you are you know uh, going pro right wing, all of this in a, of course, counterculture, quote unquote, environment, of course. And so criticizing one and going for the other, personally, I cannot agree on that.
But I did read somebody wrote recently. It was quite interesting, you know, to do with elections. That elections are not taxi rides that take you from door to door. They're like a bus ride, and it's the one that's going to get you a bit nearest to what you want. You know, so for me, in England, the Labour Party is the one that's going to get nearest to where I want to go, but it's not going to take me to the door I want to
Mm.
arrive at. You know.
I appreciate that you're outspoken about this, about politics and everything. And you know what this reminds me of? Rod Stewart was interviewed in the 80s about
Right.
about these kind of things, and I remember that he said, "You know what? I don't want to talk about politics. Let's talk about football."
Right. Okay.
Right? And
Well, I
I,
mean, I could talk about football, but the team I've supported since I was 10 years old are languishing at the bottom of the championship, which is the second division in England. And I don't really want to talk about football because
I,
it's disheartening.
I believe that Rod Stewart, what basically what he was trying to do is, not get anyone upset. He was trying to have everyone happy, right? With that,
Right.
because mostly everyone is going to be okay with football, but not with political opinions or
Yeah, but on the other end, Rod Stewart has actually admitted that he's always been a Tory, maybe not a really right wing one, a Tory, but even him over the last year has been on the TV in England and said he's had enough of them and it's time to give Labour a chance.
even
So
even
that is quite a big deal thing coming from him, you know.
Mm,
So there you go. But regardless of his politics, he's made some fantastic records, you know.
yeah.
And you know what? I mean, I still put out records and they kind of tick over and I get to go and play and I enjoy it and I get to play with some fantastic musicians. The band we got coming to San Francisco, I've got Glenn Burke on drums from Blondie. He's a great drummer and a good mate of mine. We've got Gilby Clarke from Guns N' Roses and a whole bunch of other tracks. And Steve Fixman is a mate of mine, is a great bass player. It's like a really good rock and roll band, you
You've
know,
got
and me fronted it. I'm really honoured to have those guys playing. But, you know, something like Rod Stewart, they have hit after hit after hit. And you've got to take your hat off to them because it's really hard to sustain that level of popularity.
mm,
You know, I'm kind of happy with my place. I'd rather be doing massive big places all the time that are sold out. It's not always like that, but you work it and you keep doing, have fun playing. People seem to pick up on what I'm doing now a bit more. I wish they'd done it a bit more when I was 40 years old as opposed to 67. But there's life in the old dog yet. And we put on a good show. So, you know, come on down. Might kind of pick something up and learn it. And my set comprises of songs, you know, from all aspects of my career. So yeah, there's some good stuff for everybody. I'll keep everybody happy.
so you mentioned Clem Burke. Clem Burke didn't. Oh yes, he recorded one or two songs on from Consequences Coming, right?
Yeah, he played on two songs, and that happened because I I was in England and I had a bunch of songs that were not quite finished, but I knew how they went musically and what you normally put the loud bits down first and then kind of fine tune the lyrics. And I wanted to go in the studio because Earl Slick, who plays a lot of the guitar on the album, was in London. He lives in New York. And I said, but let's go in the studio and get it done. So we did that, and I was working on the lyrics, and then lockdown happened. Couldn't do anything for ages and ages and ages. Couldn't get the record out because nobody was doing anything. And I kind of wrote another couple of songs, which kind of is like the first and last song on the album. And because lockdown was on, I couldn't get in the studio in England, and I was talking to Clem. And in lockdown, quite a few musicians did a lot of stuff online. You know, people were making charity records, and Clem had played on stuff in Los Angeles and sent the files over, and I did a bass. And then somebody else was in, well, El was in New York. He put some guitar on it. And then there was a guy in Germany did something. And it was a way of working. So that was kind of cool. So I said to Clem, look, I've got these couple of new songs. Can you get in the studio? And he could in Los Angeles when I couldn't in London. So he went and put some drums down, sent the files over, and then lockdown lifted a little bit and I could get in the studio, and I had a couple of great drum tracks from Clem. So I went in and finished them off, and that became Head on a Stick and a song called This Ship. So it was great to have Clem involved. You know, when I do an album, I've got lots of friends who've played over the years, and you know, they come and play for nothing. You know, I promise them the world, and they end up with a cappuccino and a sticky cake if they're lucky, and they still do it anyway. But I like to feel everybody involved. And, you know, when you get to a certain level of playing, people play, you know, they've surpassed the technicality of it, and they play like their personalities, and they bring something to the music more times than not. And it makes it interesting. You know, I write really simple songs, hopefully, and then it's the playing that makes it more kind of musical and stuff. But on the other end, you know, people ask me to do other things, and I go and do that gladly. You know, I mean, I'm also playing with Clem and Blondie, and we got some more shows coming up this year, and I've been quite busy with them over the last 2 years now. And in a way, I enjoy doing the Blondie stuff, and you're doing big shows, but it's got in the way a little bit of me promoting my record. But what do you do? It's better to be busy than not busy at all. So, yeah, there you go. But anyway, I'm really looking forward to come. We've been rehearsing, it sounded great. And we rock and roll a little bit.
On the January 24th, at the Great American Music Hall. That's going to be that's going to be the concert, the fifth concert of this tour, right?
Fifth one, yeah.
Fifth. Yeah. I thought it was a third. Somewhere in the internet, they're wrong. So this is the fifth concert of your tour, and you were mentioning Clem Burke. I think him along with Rat Scabies. They're some of the best drummers from that generation. Those guys could go nuts and at the same time be very tight. And you have played with both of them, right? With Rat Scabies, right?
Scabies, you said.
Thank you. Scabies with Scabies and Burke. And how is it playing with those guys?
Well, it's exciting and interesting. And I mean, I've been fortunate. I played with some great drummers. I mean, Paul Cook's a great drummer. I've got a guy who plays with me in England called Chris Musto. He used to play with Johnny Thunders for a long while, and Nico and stuff like that. I did some stuff with a version of the Faces and played with Kenny Jones, Zach Starkey. I've done stuff with. You know, it's kind of cool. They're all kind of good in different ways. But I'm going to tell you a funny story about Rat. We was having a jam with something, and he did this most fantastic drum fill, but it came in like 1.5 beats after it should have done, and it all fell apart. He was only rehearsing, it all fell apart, and he said, "You know what, Glenn?" He said, "I hate it when you can't follow me when I go wrong like that."
What band were you playing with in that moment?
We had a thing called Dead Horse. Dead Horse. Nothing came out. It was me, a guy called Gary Twin, and Durwood Andrews, who was in Generation X. He's a
Mm.
fantastic guitarist. He's really good. He's like the punk rock Paul Kossoff. He's good, really good player. But now lives in the desert in Palm Springs or somewhere, just a tree. So yeah, it's the net of punk rockers spread far and wide. But it's kind of cool, you know. It's what I like about what I did back then. You know, I've got to play with people from before the Pistols came along, which, you know, I got me going. I played with Iggy and the, you know, Ronnie Wood and stuff like that, and played with James Williamson from the Stooges on things. And
Mm.
then after that, I've worked with people like Primal Scream a little bit and Zach Starkey, who are the younger guys. And it's opened the door of possibility, and it's also opened the door of possibility in different countries as well. You know, I'm here in America playing with American guys. You know, when then Clem comes to England, he plays with English guys, and there's no, it breaks down barriers, and I think that's a good thing. You know.
Uh, you played with Tommy Ramone in 2013, and I read something that you said, and I found it very interesting. You said that you never knew how talented he was. Did you mean as a drummer, as a
No, no. When
producer?
I played, we didn't do a lot together. We did a few sort of double head acoustic shows. You know, we're both on the same bill. But we did one show in New York. In fact, we was going to do a tour, but then it became apparent he was ill and he couldn't do it. But
Mm.
we did a show in New York together, and he was a fantastic bluegrass banjo player.
Oh,
I
bang.
mean, like, yeah, he was like really good. You know, that fast blue. You know, I thought he was just a pretty good drummer who helped invent the Ramones, but he had a whole different side to him that was a real eye opener. You know.
Okay, okay. So you were talking about his skills on the banjo.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
So,
Um,
but I
and-
didn't really know him that well. You know, I met all the Ramones a little bit. You know, I knew Johnny and Joey, and I know Marky quite well. You know, but that was a real eye opener. I and another funny thing. This is in San Francisco. I went down to, is it Fisherman's Wharf down there? I went down there, and I was waiting to get the tram back. This is about 10 years ago, and there was some kind of delay. You know, when the chain popped out or something like that. And we had to wait, and it started raining. There's a big queue of people, and there was this hippie guy turned up with a banjo, and he thought, "Oh, here we go." And he was like a busker, and there was a little girl waiting for him to watch, and he started doing like a bluegrass version of Sheena as a punk rocker in front, and this little girl was dancing. It was great. Now, take it down, yeah. Go, you know. And he looked like he was mates with Willie Nelson, you know, playing a Ramones song. I like things like that, you know. They're kind of you know, the clash of two different little cultures somehow.
um, and what about Mick Ronson? I just learned that he produced the Rich Kids LP that you recorded.
That's right, yeah. Ghost
And
of Princes and Tales.
yeah,
It's
how
fantastic.
did you end up playing with Mick? Yeah, because he ended up playing. I think he played the keyboards, right? How did you end up? How did Mick Ronson end up producing your record and
Well,
playing it?
by accident, really. We had some two managers, a guy called Jerry Hempstead and a guy called Pete Walmsley. And Pete Walmsley had been a tour manager, and they had an office in Marylebone in London. And the phone rang one day. Everybody had gone, there was nobody in the office, me. So I picked up the phone, and this voice said, "Is Pete there, please?" And Mick Ronson had quite a thick northern accent. He's from Hull, you know, he talked like that. "Oh, is Peter there?" And I said, "No." I said, "Do you want to leave a message?" And he said, "Yeah, can you tell him Michael called?" I went, "Michael?" I said, "It's not Mick Ronson, is it?" And he said, "Yeah." Right. And he knew Peter Walmsley because Peter Walmsley had toured, there's a tour manager with him. And he said, "Who's that?" And I said, "It's Glenn." And Mick Ronson went, "It's not Glen Matlock, is it?" And I said, well, how do you know who I am? And he said, well, Peter's told me about you. And I went, oh, okay. I said, you know what? We're looking for a record producer. Would you be interested? And he said, yeah. I said, well, do you know what? We're rehearsing tomorrow. Why don't you come down and bring your guitar? And he did. And he came down, he got up and we did a couple of numbers. And then we went to the pub and got really drunk and had a laugh. It was cool. And it was like lucky. You don't get what you don't ask for. I think he needed a kind of gig to do something. He wanted to kind of get involved in the punk thing a little bit because the whole Bowie thing had gone wrong for him by then. And yeah, it was great. And do you know what? I met his family through that. I'm still friends with his family all these years later.
Mhm.
Mick was great. He was a superlative musician. He was funny. He was humble. Didn't suffer fools gladly. He had no airs or graces, but was such a great musician, you know. And I feel privileged to have not only met him, but to have worked with him, you know.
He also produced Lou Reed's Transformer,
Yeah.
right?
But not only that, he played piano on it and he
Yeah.
played recorder on it.
Mm.
You know, there's that song, New York, just a New York telephone conversation. And
Mm.
there's, I think it's that one, and he's playing recorder on it. And he was a grade 8 concert recorderist. When he was a kid, he'd done recorder recitals. You know, recorder?
No.
It's like a flute, but you
Mm.
don't play it that way. You play it that way. It's what you learn at school. We called it a recorder.
With keys?
No, with holes in it.
Ah, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And he did all the strings. You know, he arranged all the strings on um, Perfect Day and stuff. I mean, a vast, vast, vast talent. But he could rock and roll as well.
Yeah. No, he was great. He was fantastic. And I wanted to ask you a couple of questions regarding the punk early days. Um, uh, so we all know about some of the influences of for people from your generation. Uh, we're talking about the Stooges. We're talking about other bands, maybe the Ramones. Even though the Ramones, I believe that when the Ramones' first album came out, you guys were already playing with the Pistols. So
Well, you see, what happened was when we'd heard about some of these bands from New York, but nobody had made any records.
Hmm.
So we was aware of what they was trying to do, and we was aware of what they was trying to do because Malcolm McLaren, who was our manager, he had a clothes shop, and he would go backwards and forwards to New York to try and buy like 50s fashions. And he met those guys. He met Sylvain,
Hmm.
and I was with Sylvain. I said, "How'd you meet Malcolm?" And he said, a clothing emporium exhibition. I said, well, what was you doing there? He said, what was I doing there? He said, I used to have a blue jean shop. I said, you did? He said, yeah. And I sold a pair of dungarees to Janis Joplin. This is Sylvain. And they met Malcolm and they took him out to clubs. He was this weird guy from England. Yeah, and then he saw like early Ramones and television and the Heartbreakers, and he got involved with the tail end of the New York Dolls, and he told us about it. But none of those people had made any records at that
Hmm.
stage.
Yeah.
So, you know, and when we first heard them, we was quite taken aback at how similar they
Yeah.
were. And I think what happened was everybody in England and everybody in New York had got fed up with listening to all the dinosaur bands all the time, you know, like Barclay James Harvest and Yes
Hmm.
and Genesis. They didn't mean anything to kids.
Yeah.
And we wanted to do our own thing. So, you know, it was like a kind of a global village, both sides of the Atlantic. People were looking for something new. And that was a slightly, you know, what was going on in England was the real mess politically in the mid 70s. And the same thing in New York. You know, when I first went to New York, it was like almost like, although it was New York, nothing worked. It was like all the roads were broken, you know, and if there was a hole in the road and they got some kind of system of steam that goes to the buildings, instead of fixing it, they just put a chimney over it. It was like, you know, it was crazy.
Mm.
So,
So the first Ramones record, I believe, I could be mistaken, that was out in 1975. And and you guys were already playing in
We did our first gig in 1975 at St Martin's Art College.
but when I remember that the first time I heard the New York Dolls, that was after I heard the Pistols. uh, I I I thought, oh, this sounds so much like Steve Jones' guitar, and
Well,
so
that is another thing. Yeah, we were aware of the New York Dolls, and I was a big fan of a band called the Faces,
yeah,
right? Who I got to play with, luckily, for a little bit. But I went to see the Faces, and when you're a kid and you bought a ticket yourself, you go and see all the support bands because you want to get your money's worth. And this band came on, and it was the New York Dolls. And it was the very original New York Dolls with their drummer Billy Mercier, who died only a few weeks after that. So I actually saw the original New York Dolls, and I'd kind of heard of them a little bit about from Malcolm, and we had their record, and Steve really picked up on it. But the music for me that got me going, although I appreciated that and I liked the energy of it and the intention, I really liked all the bands from the 60s in England, like the early Kinks and the Who and the Small Faces and the Yardbirds and the Stones. That's what got me going, really. And I think there's an element of that in the Pistol stuff, but then Steve plays guitar solos like Johnny Thunders, maybe a little bit too much like Johnny Thunders sometimes.
so he was influenced, right,
He
by
was, yeah.
yeah,
But again, when I was talking about songwriting, there's lots of different ingredients. It might sound very simple, but there's lots of ingredients in it that
yeah,
makes a very thick kind of simplicity.
that's true. Now you mentioned the dinosaur bands. Uh, Now the Kinks, the Stones, bands like that. That
They're not dinosaur bands.
but they used to be in the 60s. They were very rebellious,
Yeah.
and so by the mid late 70s, were they considered dinosaur in
No, no, I think as far as I was concerned, they might have kind of lost the plot a little bit. But
Mm,
you can't take anything away from a band that recorded "You Really Got Me"
yeah,
and "All Day and All the Night" and "So Tired of Waiting" and "Waterloo Sunset" and "I Got to Move," stuff like that. They're always there,
yeah.
you know. But bands like Yes and Genesis, I mean, Towers from the Topographic Ocean. What the fuck is that all about? The six ways of Henry VIII. What on ice? What the fuck is that all about? But on the other hand, Rick Wakeman played piano on Space Oddity, so
Yeah. Yeah, no, Ray Davis. I read some kind of homage, I think is the word, that Pete Townsend, put out. Pete Townsend really admires still Ray Davis, and I think,
he's England's greatest living songwriter.
oh man,
You know,
he's just fantastic, fantastic.
yeah, yeah.
Um, okay, so influences, the punk days, the Stooges for sure. Actually, you guys played No Fun. And so we could continue talking about the influences for people from your generation in those days. But what about psychedelia? For example, the Jam made a cover of Rain, this psychedelic Beatles song. Stranglers, they played 96 Tears from Question Mark and the Mysterians.
Right, okay. Well, 96 Tears, right? One of the things that was an early influence that we were hip to, there was an album came out that the guy from the Patti Smith group, who was the guitarist in the Patti Smith group, not Ivan Crowell, the other guy.
Lenny,
Yeah, Lenny Kay.
Lenny Kaye, yeah,
He did a compilation album called Nuggets,
yeah,
and there was all these bands on it.
Rush,
Like I think maybe not Question Mark and Mysterians, but the Strawberry Alarm Clock and the 13th Floor Elevators and the Electric Prunes, and yeah, what a great name for a band, the Jagged Edge. Wow, what a great, and what's the other one? Did Nighttime by what were they called? The Strange Loves or something like that.
Yeah.
That album was kind of quite influential. So that was the kind of first, and that was actually called punk,
Mm.
but it wasn't what we was trying to do. But then we became called punk. You know, we wasn't particularly happy with being called punk, but it kind of stuck. So
And what about German bands? For example, the crowd rock came at the same time the progressive rock did, but the Germans were much more experimental, much more raw, much more crazy in some ways. And
well, you know, one of the best gigs I ever saw, possibly in 1973, there was a place in London called Hammersmith Palais, which was a dance hall that started having bands on. And one week I saw Little Richard, and the next week I saw Can.
mm,
And they were fantastic. It was one of the best gigs I've ever been to. And they didn't even have their singer at that stage. They were a four piece. So, and I really
but
dug.
before Damo Suzuki?
I think it was
Okay.
after, and you know the guy who's the most sampled drummer in the world is Jackie Leibich,
Yeah.
right? You know, and him and Holger Kuske, the bass player, it's fantastic.
Holger Sukai, I believe was
Yeah, I don't know how you pronounce it, Sakai.
yeah.
That was cool, you know. Cam, and then I followed them a little bit. I really like their Sunova Babaluma album. That's one that I
Yeah.
put on every now. It was kind of different thing. It was very European, you know. And I got into Kraftwerk at a really early age. You know, I like their album Radioactivity.
Oh, fantastic.
Nothing to do with rock and roll. It's got this whole kind of European style of songwriting that it's cool, you know. So
But what was
my
was
mind, I was putting a few little bits and pieces together and that. And in fact, Holger Suke, however you pronounce it,
mm,
he taught me. He didn't deliberately take, but I picked up from him just the importance of when to change the octave on the bass. You know,
mhm,
and that kind of gives a movement to your bass playing.
mhm.
That sounds like a silly little thing, but if you listen to the Anarchy in the UK, most people think it just goes boom, 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 boom. But I'm doing this boom, 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 and I got that from Can. Yeah, so there you go.
Oh, but that's a very interesting thing. So Sukai, uh, is it possible to summarize what he told you about
Well, he
change
didn't tell
octave?
me anything. It was just from watching him and listening
Ah,
to
okay,
him.
okay.
You know, I've never met him. I'd like to meet him, but I don't know if he's still around. Actually,
No, I
you
think
know.
he died. I believe he died. I could be mistaken. Um, so we're
But
back.
then, see, but then other things with the krautrock thing, you got Kraftwerk,
Oh,
and then that kind of fed into those fantastic four albums that Bowie made. You know, two
yeah,
with himself, which was just before punk in Berlin, and two with Iggy Pop. You know, Lust for Life and the Idiot, and then Kraftwerk. I've got a song Trans Europe Express where they meet Iggy Pop and David Bowie.
yeah,
So it's all kind of feeds in there, you know.
yeah. Iggy really liked Noi.
Right. Okay. I didn't pick up on them so much, you know, but then there was another band called Kraut, wasn't there, as well? Um, which I think was kind of tackling things head on by calling themselves Kraut, you know, Kraut rock.
Yeah. So you know bands like Noi, even though they're contemporary with progressive bands from the UK or other places, in some ways they were the opposite. They were like super minimalistic
Yeah.
uh, and you just mentioned some influence that Holger Sukai from Cannes had in your style, Uh, uh, but was it like the influence of bands like this, was it something that you could see in people from your generation from those early punk days?
Um, Not really. You know, if I picked up on something and then told Steve about it, he'd go, "Well, that's not very rock and roll, is it?" And he wasn't interested at all. So he'd be playing his bit, and I'd be putting my little bit in, and it was this match of ideas. I was talking to James Williamson
Hmm.
before, and we was doing like a joint interview, and somebody said, "Well, what were your influences?" And he went the Rolling Stones, and I said, "Ah." But Jim, Iggy Pop told me he was really into the Doors. And he went, "Did he?" And I said, "Yeah." And it's those two things coming together made the Stooges sound a little bit different. If everybody had liked the same thing all the time, it would have been a bit boring, you know.
Yeah, of
When
course.
in a good band, each individual member brings something different to the soup.
And
You know,
what about the
Pistols, the
Doors?
only thing I've really liked, I like Tamla Motown. I'm a big fan of James Jameson's bass player. Who isn't? But I mean, he's the king. So yeah.
And what about the Doors? There were also lots of bands from your generation that covered the Doors. It was like I don't know, Susie and the Band. She said there's several bands ended up covering the Doors.
Doors were always cool.
Yeah,
People liked them because they was a bit more left field, but still kind of accessible. Good songs, but had a darkness to them. And then again, there's the Doors did that Kurt Weill song, Whiskey Bar, A
mm,
Moon of Alabama, it's called. So that's kind of getting involved with the German thing again, and it's all sort of in there somehow.
okay, okay. So I'm here talking to Glen Matlock. Um, he's touring the U.S., California in this moment. Well, not only California, but he is in California now. He's about to start his 2024 US tour, and he's going to be playing songs from Consequences Coming, his last uh, record, his seventh record, solo record. Am I right?
Um, I've never really counted. You're probably right. I'm
First one,
doing some
actually.
songs. I'm doing some songs from that, but I'm doing songs from all aspects of my career, and they all kind of fit together quite well because I'm the bloke what wrote them. But I'm not trying to force my new album down everybody's throat. I think that's a bit what's the word? Presumptuous. You know.
Yeah. Mm.
It's like Clem. Don't tell him this, but Clem's a big Bruce Springsteen fan, and I kind of appreciate Bruce Springsteen. But the whole idea of going to a show where he plays for 4 hours,
Yeah.
I think that's big headed, you
Mm.
know.
Yeah.
I wouldn't expect anybody to want to see me for 4 hours. So I'd like to keep it short and sweet ish,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Gotcha. Uh, um, You once said that you thought that the Pistols made people question things about music and the social significance of it. Do you think people are doing that now, questioning music, art, and its social significance?
Well, there's always people who like to the dialectic of talking about the whys and wherefores of things. I think the whole Pistols thing really was a bit more kind of gut reaction. And in all honesty, it was four guys who wanted to have a go at doing something. That was the real bottom line, and it came out how it came out. But we were no schmoes, and we were hip to certain things. We were hanging out with Malcolm McLaren, which was probably in the mid-70s the hippest place to be, which we didn't really realise, although soon realised. And it all kind of rubbed off, we were like sponges and soaked all these ideas up that were knocking around. One of the other people that knocked around with Malcolm was Bernard Rhodes, who went on to manage the Clash. And then there's like Vivian Westwood and Jamie Reed, and that was part of our little gang who lived a bit more than us. And there were ideas floating around, and not many bands are privileged to be in that position. But we were privileged because we all put ourselves in that position because of some kind of gut reaction of feeling that Malcolm's shop down the King's Road was the right place to be on a Saturday afternoon.
Mm. Sex.
So, well, it was called Let It Rock originally. It was a Teddy Boy shop, and then it became Sex, and then it became Sedition, and then it became World's End, and it was always on a movable feast. But yeah, we was there in its heyday. Yeah.
Mm. Um, in 1996, you reunited with the Pistols,
Yeah,
and in a press conference, and I believe also in other places. So basically, uh, what hit the news is that the Pistols said that you were this time or that time you were trying to make money for you instead of letting other people make money from you, and that actually that there was a statement like we are here for your money or something like that. I
but
don't.
John said that. I mean, he knew that we was going to be accused of
Yeah,
making money, and so he turned it around and threw it back in people's faces. In fact,
I remember
one of
that.
the headlines when we
Yeah,
did the Bill Grundy show the next day in the national newspaper was "Filthy Lucre," like dirty money. We actually called the tour the Filthy Lucre tour.
yeah,
The thing is with the Pistols, like what everybody's done individually over the years, with varying degrees of success, people still talk about the Sex Pistols, and it comes a stage where you think, if that's what they want, just give it to them, and
mm,
that's what we did. But I'm glad we did it. It it made it mended some fences between us. We made some money. What's wrong with that?
of course.
When we played in London, we had 36,000 people there. When I played with the Pistols the first time around, there was probably maybe 400 people at the biggest gig that we did.
Yeah,
And for a band that had never put a record out in all that time, it was a bit of an achievement, really.
yeah,
And then everyone was going, "Oh, we're 40." Well, I was only 39, but we were still relatively young, so it's never going to be exactly the same as the first time around. But we didn't pretend it was, so we got to play our music and get paid for it. What's wrong with that?
of
You
course,
know?
of course. And I remember that I liked those statements back then because it sounded very honest to me. And
Well, do you know what was the most honest thing?
what?
We did a press conference at the 100 Club, right? Now,
Yeah.
John had his wife there, and I had my girlfriend, and Paul had his wife there. And somebody said, "What are you going to do with the money?" And Steve Jones went, "I'm going to spend it on prostitutes." And we were like, we looked round, and he went, "Well, I am anyway."
And
Steve is the most honest person I've ever met in the world. Most people might think something and then it goes through some filter before it comes out of their mouth.
uh,
Not with him.
and speaking of him, do you think that Pistol was basically made for money? The series, I'm talking about the series.
A little bit. Didn't necessarily come my way. I think Steve had written a book and he wanted to tell his story. Steve was the guy who formed the band in the first place. I thought it was important that he got to tell his story, so I backed him up on it. I was a bit I thought the TV series could have been a lot better than it was, to be honest.
I
And
agree.
I think it was a bit lame,
Yeah,
really.
yeah.
You know.
I mean, lame because of the way in which they depict the characters, but also lame in terms of the quality of the series. I don't think it's very good.
Yeah, it wasn't. So,
Uh,
but anyway, I was annoyed when I first saw it, but it's been and gone now, already. So there you go.
yeah, and speaking of those guys, um, sometimes Lydon depicted you as someone that was somewhat more conservative than the rest of the guys, or at least than him. Would you agree on that?
No, I disagree with that. I
Mhm,
think I was maybe a little bit quieter. I was the youngest one in the band at the time,
mhm.
maybe a tiny little bit shyer. But no, you don't get to be the guy, even before John was in the band, to kind of end up working in this really weird shop down the King's Road and meeting Steve and Paul and forming a band called the Sex Pistols. You don't do that if you're a bit on the straight side, you know.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. And also, now turning that into music. Personally, I think that the Pistols lost a lot musically when you left, and because your bass lines were a little bit more musical, and they added a lot of character to the songs. And so when you were playing with them, did they ever tell you, "Hey, keep things more simple"? It's not that you were like super complicated, but you had like these really cool arrangements.
And, yeah, a little bit, you know, but I used to ignore them. You know, my yardstick with the bass playing Pistols is like, listen to the Who,
Mm.
right? Now, Townsend's a fantastic lead guitarist, not a fantastic rhythm guitarist, not so great on the lead, wrote some great songs. But what makes some of those early Who records is the bass playing. You know,
Oh, in Whistle.
my
Ooh.
generation, down, 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 down on the guitar. But Entwistle was going boom, 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 boom. It gives it a whole different groove, you know, and that's kind of where I was coming from,
Was he
really. I
in?
think the bass gives the color to a song in a three-piece band, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah,
If your guitarist is a little bit limited. I love what Steve does. He's fantastic at what he does, but it's always a very simple thing done well, and he plays with a great attitude. But he's not Mick Ronson. You know?
yeah, yeah. Some of the early demos of the Pistols, where you can clearly hear the bass, your bass, of course. It's such a big difference compared to Nevermind the Bollocks.
Yeah, it's a big wall of sound, and Steve wanted it. I'd left by then, and it was Steve just did the root note thing. But I think if you're talking maybe about the Spunk album, which was all our demos, the reason you could hear the bass is because Dave Goodman, who was our sound guy,
Mm.
he recorded and mixed it. And you know what? He was a bass player.
Oh, that helps.
He kind of like what I did, and it was quite handy, really.
How many songs did you ended up playing the bass in the
On the
Nevermind the
album, not
Bollocks?
a lot, but Anarchy and No Fun, and I Want to Be Me and stuff. And Steve did a lot. I'd left by then, but my claim to fame is all those important songs. I had a big hand in writing, you know. So
Mm. Yeah, of course, of course. And when you after you left, there's these concerts and these recordings, and I mean, of course, the bass, or either it doesn't sound or it's terrible. How did you feel, when you heard your songs in such a bad performance?
I just thought it was too black and white. I think the production's great. I just think the bass is boring. Really, Steve gets annoyed. He thinks that I think he can't play bass. He can play bass, but he plays bass like a guitarist.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's funny. I was talking to Mick Jones. I did something with him in the studio, and I was playing guitar, like rhythm guitar. And he said, "The thing is, Glenn, you play guitar like a bass player." And I said, "I know." I said, "And when you play bass like a guitar player." So,
We're here with Glen Matlock, and he will play in San Francisco on January 24th, at Great American Music Hall.
yeah.
And today I was listening to The Soldier.
Oh,
It-
good
it-
album, man.
oh, that's fantastic album, man. And and we were talking about influences a few minutes ago, and um, but Iggy was there before you guys. He's older than you guys, and you ended up playing with Iggy. Was Iggy's attitude more uh, anarchic than people from your generation?
Um, Not really. It's just he was just a bit different. I think I don't know. He'll probably get annoyed with this. I think because he'd worked with Bowie and he'd been touring. He'd had not a great deal of success then, but he was touring at quite a higher level more constantly. And he's Iggy Pop and the lead singer, and that I think people kind of pandered to him a little bit more, and he kind of got away with some things that maybe he shouldn't have done. If you had a kid and you let them get away with everything all the time, it doesn't do him a lot of good in the long run. And I think when I worked with him, I pulled him up a couple of times, and he was like, "Oh, yeah." But it was an interesting experience. I love working on that album. I mean, his lyrics to some songs on it, "Take Care of Me," which I co-wrote, but he wrote the lyrics and I wrote music. And there's that song "Loco Mosquito."
Yeah.
The lyrics on that are fantastic. I got some energy that makes me jumpy and nervous, but I'm too jam. Yeah, it's kind of cool. And in fact, on that one, he's not credited, but Bowie mixed that. And there's a bass run I do in the middle. Bowie pushed the bass up.
Great.
And in fact, if you do the gig, I'm going to do the song "Ambition," which is on that album, which is what I wrote.
Actually, wait a second. Do you play a cover of Iggy Pop's Ambition?
Well, I do my version of it.
Yeah.
Which
You,
was
you
a bit more of a blues song than it should have been in the first place. But Iggy's version is interesting. But I'm pleased that he did that, because Iggy rarely ever has done anybody else's lyric, and it's my lyric on that song.
I was gonna mention that, man, about this girl, right?
Well, it's actually about my ex-wife. Who was having a hard time, and I wrote a song to kind of cheer her up a little bit. And that song was originally written for the Rich Kids second album, but we never made the second album in the end. So when I started working with Biggie's, and he had to make an album, and he had a deal where he had to make an album once a year, and you got to get loads of ideas all the time. And I think they wanted me to be involved to put some ideas in, which I did do, and that was one of the songs I had, and he liked it, so he did it.
So it's your lyrics, and is it?
That's my song.
And the music is yours?
Yeah, "Ambition" is my song. Yeah.
Okay. It's a very, very, very good song, man. Actually, I was listening to that today. And did Iggy ever, when you were playing with him, did he tell you what to play, or he would just let you do your own stuff?
No, he let you do your own stuff, but if when I played with him, we do. I started playing with him when he made that album, New Values, and I played with him because the guy who played bass on the album was going to play second guitar on the tour, so they were short of a bass player. And the agent I had, John Giddings, who now does the Isle of Wight Festival and stuff, he knew that the Rich Kids were splitting up, and he knew that Iggy needed a bass player, so he suggested me, and that's how I got the gig. But some of the songs were from the New Values album that we were doing to promote. Lots of Stooges songs and stuff. When you play a song from somebody, you got to kind of play how it goes. Otherwise, it doesn't sound like the song, So you have to learn the songs, and then you kind of do your sort of slightly different version to it. But yeah, it's kind of in that sort of punk rock and roll idiom, and it's not such a stretch from what I was always doing anyway, really.
Okay. And how and I also read this in this interview that you mentioned that you went partying with Bowie and Iggy, and you ended up in the limousines, that there was not enough space, blah blah blah. And
yeah, it was going down Park Avenue, sitting on David Bowie's knee because it was all squeezed in. Not only the same car, but he had the same driver from The Man Who Fell to Earth. The car he drives around in that with the same driver was the same thing that we was going down. We played at a club called Hurrah, which is up near Central Park, and went down to the mud club in it, all squeezed in his car. It was fun, and he was there. It was great meeting Bowie quite a few times, and he was there because he was good mates with Iggy, and he would come to our shows. So not really a big stretch. And Bowie was always out and about doing things. In fact, I saw him maybe a year or so after that. I got invited to go and see Talking Heads at Radio City Music Hall, and I walked in, and Bowie was there, and he said, "Oh, hi, Glenn." And me and him were watching Talking Heads from just behind the curtain on the side of the stage, and he was singing all the words to the songs in my ear in his best David Bowie voice. I think he was showing off that he knew all the words. Right? It was great.
What year was that?
That must have been about 1980 by then. 80, 81.
Why did you stop playing with Iggy?
Reasons. Maybe not. I wish I'd kept playing with him, to be honest, but somebody made me an offer to make my own album, which I kind of wanted to do. And in fact, it was the head of Iggy's record company, a guy called Charles Levison. I could have done both, really, but young and headstrong. I wish I kept playing with Iggy longer. But there you go.
He just played last year in San Francisco.
Well, last year I saw him when I was in Los Angeles, and he played the Palladium, where we played with the Pistols, and the show was great. And he had Chad from the Red Hot Chili Peppers on drums, and Slash got up, and Duff, and they were kind of cool. And it was funny. There was a guy, and I couldn't quite see the stage. There was a keyboard player, and I thought, I know that guy from somewhere. And I thought, and I'd done something with Ronnie Wood in the studio the summer before. And there was a guy there, Matt Clifford, who plays with the Stones. And I thought, it was just the way his hair was and the way he stood. I thought, he don't know. Anyway, after the show, I was having a drink with someone. He come out, and it was him. I thought, what are you doing there? And he said, well, it's just funny how things work. And that show was fantastic. And then I went back to London, and we did a big show with Blondie in Crystal Palace with Iggy on the bill. And I thought it was going to be the same band, but it was a totally different band. It was still really good. It wasn't quite as good as the one in America, but it was only a few weeks later, and it was a totally different band. Oh, there you go. They had trumpet player.
Well, Iggy's stamina seems to be eternal.
Yeah. And he was great. But I tell you what, when I saw him at the Palladium in Los Angeles, he came out and did an encore, and he sang Walk on the Wild Child. I'd never seen him do that. It was fantastic. And he meant it. When he sang it, he meant it. It was great. Really good.
Yeah, he did the same thing in San Francisco. Yeah, it was fantastic. Yeah.
Cool.
Glenn, really nice talking to you. Glenn is playing on the 24th in San Francisco at the Great American Music Hall. You should go. You should go see him. And I don't know if there's something else that you want to mention before we finish the interview.
No, not really. It's been great talking to you. Yes, come on down. The show's going to be great. The band sounding fantastic. We've been rehearsing all this week. We've got a bit more, and then we've got shows coming up. So by the time we get to San Francisco, it's really going to be cooking. As you mentioned, I've got an album out now called Consequences Coming, which is, you can check it out on YouTube and Amazon and Spotify. And I'm proud of it. So, and I've been involved in some good stuff over the years. And I think this is right up there with it. So check it out, ladies and gentlemen.